Have you ever imagined being imprisoned in a Nazi concentration camp? Now imagine being sent to 5 different death camps, escaping and being captured again, and still surviving to tell the tale. Sounds like a war movie script, right? But it's not. This was the real life of Josef Lukovic, a man who defied all odds and survived the impossible. Josef was a young man full of dreams when the Second World War turned his life upside down. As a soldier in the Polish resistance, he fought against the Nazis, but was captured and sentenced to a fate that for many was a death sentence. What he experienced in the concentration camps is beyond our understanding. Torture, hunger, forced labor, and the constant shadow of death accompanied him at every moment. However, he did not surrender. What kept Josef alive when so many others succumbed? Luck, intelligence, pure willpower? The answer lies in the story that you will now learn, a story that will shock you, move you, and make you reflect on how far a human being can go to survive. Get ready, because what you're going to hear now isn't just a history lesson. It is a testament to the resilience, desperation, and strength of a man who refused to die. Imagine that you are living your life normally. You have friends, family, dreams, but suddenly everything changes. You are ripped from your home, placed on an overcrowded train, not knowing where you are going. Fear mixes with the smell of sweat, despair, and death. The destination, a Nazi concentration camp. That was the reality of Josef Lukovic when he was captured by the Nazis. He wasn't just any civilian, he was a young Jewish soldier in the Polish resistance. And for the Nazis, that meant one thing: he must be eliminated. But before that, he would have to suffer. Josef was sent to Plaszow, a concentration camp in Poland. If that name sounds familiar to you, perhaps it's because you've heard of Amon Goth, the commander of that camp. Yes, the same cruel officer portrayed in the film Schindler's List. The reality was even worse than any movie could show. Goeth's brutality was legendary. He used to shoot prisoners from the balcony of his house, just for fun. As soon as Josef arrived in Plaszow, he realized that this place was not made for prisoners, but for victims. Every step was a potential death sentence. Guards were everywhere, always ready to kill anyone who moved too slowly, who said the wrong thing, or simply who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. The rule there was clear: be useful or die. Josef quickly understood that to survive, he needed to be invisible. He began to observe who were the prisoners who lived the longest. What did they do? How did they behave? He realized that those who had essential work, such as mechanics, cooks, or artisans, had a greater chance of surviving. So he did his best to appear helpful. The days became weeks, the weeks months. Every dawn was a challenge. Forced labor was exhausting, often meaningless. Josef was forced to carry heavy stones back and forth for no apparent reason. The goal wasn't to build anything. It was just to break the prisoners, exhaust them to the point where they couldn't take it anymore. And as if that weren't enough, hunger was constant. Prisoners were given only a thin bowl of soup and a piece of hard bread. The weakness was so great that many fainted while working. But those who fell to the ground rarely got up again. The guards fired without hesitation. Josef saw companions disappear one by one. He knew that if he didn't do something, he would soon be next. He could not wait to be released. The only way out was to flee. But escaping from Plaszow was almost impossible. Armed guards watched every corner. Electric fences surrounded the field. And if someone tried to escape, the punishment didn't just fall on the fugitive. The Nazis killed other prisoners in retaliation. Even so, Josef did not give up. He started planning. I needed a moment of distraction, a unique opportunity to get out of there. But before he could execute his plan, something unexpected happened. He was transferred to another concentration camp. If Josef thought Plaszow was The worst hell a human being could face, he would soon discover that the suffering was far from over. He was about to enter a new nightmare. The first escape and the second hell. Josef barely had time to process Plashow's terror when he was suddenly placed on a new train. The destination was unknown, but he knew that nothing good awaited him. These transports were brutal. Prisoners were thrown into cramped freight cars with no food, no water, and almost no air. The smell of sweat, urine, and death permeated the environment. Some did not reach their destination alive. After hours of suffocating travel, the train doors were brutally opened. Screams echoed, dogs barked. The Nazis beat prisoners to get them out quickly. Josef looked around and realized he was in a new concentration camp, Gross-Rosen, one of the worst in the Reich. If he thought Plaszow was cruel, Gross-Rosen was a real nightmare. The camp was known for its extreme brutality and inhumane forced labor. Prisoners were forced to break huge blocks of stone, often in freezing temperatures, without any clothing suitable for the cold. The food, even less than before. Death, even closer. Josef knew he wouldn't last long there. But unlike many, he still had something that kept him alive, the conviction that he needed to escape. And this opportunity arrived unexpectedly. The opportunity to escape. One day, Josef was included in a group of prisoners who were to be transported to another location. It was common for the Nazis to move prisoners from one camp to another, and this was a rare chance. Inside the camp, escape was almost impossible, but in the middle of a transfer, there were loopholes. Josef knew he needed to be quick and smart. As the group was escorted off the field, he carefully observed his surroundings. Transportation was done on foot through a snow-covered forest. Guards marched around, armed and alert. But there was a moment when the path became narrower, the trees became denser, and the vigilance for a brief moment lessened. It was now or never. Josef took a deep breath, waited for the right moment, and at the exact moment the guards were distracted, he dove into the forest. The cold was biting. My heart was beating fast. He ran without looking back, hearing screams and gunshots echoing in the distance. But he didn't stop. I couldn't stop. He knew that if he were recaptured, death would not be quick. It would be a spectacle of torture to serve as an example to other prisoners. After hours of running aimlessly, hiding between trees and trying to control his fear, Josef finally stopped to catch his breath. He was free. At least for now. Freedom lasted a short time. Over the next few days, Josef tried to find food and shelter. He knew that as a Jew and a fugitive, he could trust no one. Many Poles, out of fear or sympathy for the Nazi regime, reported escaped prisoners. Every step was a risk. He managed to hide in an abandoned cabin for a few nights, but the cold and hunger were relentless. His body was too weak to continue running for long. Then, the inevitable happened. During a Nazi patrol, Josef was found. He tried to resist, but there was nowhere to run. The guards smiled when they saw him. It was as if they had found a prize. He was violently beaten right there, left almost unconscious. But the worst part was yet to come. Josef was taken back to Gross-Rosen, where he was publicly punished. He thought he would be executed in front of everyone. But the Nazis had something worse in mind. For them, killing a fugitive outright was too easy. They wanted him to suffer, and the suffering was just beginning. Instead of being killed, Josef was placed on a new transport, this time to an even crueler fate. He was going to Sachsenhausen, a camp that was not only a place of extermination, but also a training center for future SS officers. What he would face there was beyond what any human mind could bear. Josef thought he couldn't suffer any more than he had already suffered. But I was wrong. Josef had already experienced hell in two different versions. First, he survived the terror of Plaszow, where the sadistic Amon Goeth terrorized prisoners with random executions. Then he escaped the horror of Gross-Rosen, only to be recaptured and brutally punished. Now he was transported to a third destination, an even darker field, Sachsenhausen. This time he knew exactly what to expect. No mercy, no hope, just suffering. But Sachsenhausen was no ordinary camp. It was a camp where the Nazis trained their future military officers, SS. This meant that prisoners were not just exploited, they were used as live guinea pigs. If a young Nazi soldier wanted to learn how to apply torture, how to force someone to confess to a crime they never committed, or how to break a human spirit, Sachsenhausen was the perfect school. The first time Josef almost died, Josef was thrown into the political prisoner wing. There, any mistake was fatal. One look in the wrong direction, one sigh at the wrong time, and a prisoner could be taken to the yard and executed. Before long, he was called up for an experiment. Nazi guards were testing new methods of human resistance. They forced Josef and other prisoners to march for miles without rest, carrying weights and wearing shoes made from experimental materials. The idea was simple. Find out how long a man could walk before his feet started to bleed and he passed out from exhaustion. Josef walked until his legs gave out. He fell. He tasted blood in his mouth, the ground frozen against his sweaty skin. An SS guard approached and laughed. "Weaker than I thought," he said, lifting his boot. The blow came with force. The metal tip smashed into Josef's face. The world spun. He thought he would die right there, but for some reason, the guard decided he still had some value. Josef was dragged to the infirmary. His face was disfigured, but he survived. The second time Josef almost died after the brutal beating, Josef was moved to a different wing of the camp. This time, he was put to work falsifying documents. Sachsenhausen had a secret program where skilled prisoners were forced to manufacture fake passports and money for Nazi operations. Josef, with his quick wit, learned the art of forgery. But this position, which might seem advantageous, was a mortal risk. Any error in the documents meant immediate execution. One of the prisoners in the group of forgers was accused of making a minor mistake. The Nazis decided to punish the entire group to set an example. Josef and the others were taken to a courtyard. The guards randomly chose 3 men to be executed. Josef felt a cold sweat run down his back. They passed in front of him, looked into his eyes, and chose another. He felt a mix of relief and guilt. Survived once again, but I knew that the next day it could be him. The third time, Josef almost died. By this time, Josef had already been through experiences that would have killed any ordinary person. But Sachsenhausen was not his last destination. As the Nazis were losing the war, many camps began to be emptied, and prisoners were transferred on death marches to other locations. Josef was put on a new train, this time bound for Mauthausen, a field known as the Dead End Field. This was one of the worst concentration camps in the Reich. There, prisoners were forced to climb up and down 186 steps in a quarry carrying very heavy blocks of stone. Whoever fell was executed. Josef barely had the strength to walk, but he was forced to carry weight every day. The cold, hunger, and physical exhaustion left him on the verge of collapse. He saw men collapsing beside him. Some begged for mercy. Others simply gave up. One night, feeling like he couldn't stand another day, Josef made a desperate decision. If he didn't run now, he would never have another chance. The war was coming to an end, and rumors said that the Allies were advancing. Josef just needed to survive a little longer, but he knew that if he stayed in Mauthausen, he would die. He needed to get out of there, and once again, he would face death to try to find freedom. The last field, and freedom. Josef Lukowicz had escaped death so many times that he was beginning to wonder if fate had some bigger plan for him. He survived the terror of Plaszow, to hell Gross-Rosen, to the torture of Sachsenhausen and the nightmare of Mauthausen. But now he would face his greatest challenge. He was being sent to Ebensee, one of the last concentration camps built by the Nazis and possibly the cruelest of all. By this time, the Third Reich was collapsing. Allied troops were advancing across Europe, and the Nazis, desperate, tried to hide their atrocities. But instead of releasing the prisoners, they decided to exterminate them as quickly as possible. Josef was thrown onto a train bound for Ebensee without knowing that this could be his last day alive. Ebensee's nightmare. Ebensee was a camp built for total destruction. Prisoners were forced to dig gigantic tunnels in the mountains to hide Nazi factories from Allied bombings. The work was inhumane, without food, without rest, and under constant gunpoint. Those who became too weak to dig were simply eliminated. Josef was no longer the same man who had entered the first field. His body was skeletal, his face marked by blows and suffering. But something inside him still refused to give up. He noticed that the guards were more nervous, less organized. The rumors were true, the Allies were close, but that didn't mean safety. On the contrary, the Nazis were rushing the executions. Knowing that defeat was inevitable, they wanted to erase the evidence of their crimes. The gas chambers and mass graves operated non-stop. Josef knew he had little time. He needed to hide. The most difficult decision. The opportunity appeared in a brutal way. In the midst of a chaotic movement of prisoners, the Nazis began selecting those who would be executed immediately. Josef saw the soldiers walking towards him. Panic took over. Then he did something unthinkable. He threw himself into a pile of bodies. With the unbearable stench and blood covering his body, he lay still, holding his breath. I heard the footsteps of the Nazi guards, the shots echoing across the field, the screams of despair all around. But he lay there, motionless, pretending to be dead. The minutes seemed like hours. His heart was beating so loudly that he thought he would be heard. But then, silence. When Josef finally mustered the courage to look around, he realized that the Nazis were gone. He was still alive. But for how long? The arrival of the Allies, 2 days later, American soldiers finally reached Ebensee. The camp was liberated, but the scene they encountered was one of pure horror. The survivors were little more than living skeletons. Many could no longer walk, talk, or even understand that they were free. Josef was found by one of the soldiers, who was shocked to see that he was still breathing. He was taken to a makeshift hospital where he received food, water, and medical treatment. But his body was so weakened that it took months for him to recover. When he finally managed to get out of bed, Josef did something he promised himself he would do if he survived. He told his story to the world, the post-war and Josef's legacy. After the war, Josef dedicated his life to ensuring that the world never forgot the horrors of the Holocaust. He testified in trials against Nazis, helped document the atrocities he witnessed, and spent decades sharing his story with the world. He didn't want revenge. He wanted memory. I wish no one would ever go through what he went through. Josef Lukowicz survived 5 concentration camps, unspeakable torture, and imminent death countless times. But his greatest victory was not just escaping. It was finding the strength to move forward and transform your pain into a powerful testimony. And now, this story comes to you. If this journey impacted you, share it. Because what happened to Josef cannot be forgotten. Never. Don't let this story die. Sign up now. If this story impacted you, don't let her fall into oblivion. Stories like Josef Lukowicz need to be told, remembered and shared so that they never happen again. And if you like knowing real stories of courage, resistance, and survival? Then subscribe to the channel now. Here, we bring unbelievable stories that show what human beings are capable of facing and overcoming. Activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Leave your like to support this work. Comment. What impressed you most about this story? Your opinion is very important. Share this video so that more people can learn about this impressive journey. Until the next video.